Funding for this video is brought to you in part by Book of the Month and from viewers like you. Thank you. What's up, punks? Welcome to video. Today we have another book chat scheduled. I understand all you vlog lovers out there, you're itching for another vlog. I am too, but sometimes we have some business to attend to. Today's business, what was read in December. Next week there will be a vlog, don't worry. December was a very quiet reading month for me, which we'll get to. But despite not reading a lot, we did cover quite a few genres, which is very exciting. So today's video will be a friendly reminder to read at your own pace and honor your brain and body with wherever it's at today. But before we dive into the books that we read last month, let's hear from today's sponsor, who is none other than Book of the Month. Now, if you have a US or Canadian based shipping address and you're looking to spice up your TBR shop with some funky fresh reads, then look no further than this bookish subscription service. Book of the Month is an ever-growing and profoundly popular reading resource because their team works hard every day sifting through hundreds of titles to present us with a monthly curated list of new and early release books. This means that each and every month you get a new release hardcover fiction delivered straight to your door at the best price, mind you. However, my personal favorite part is their skip policy. You can push pause, pass for the month, or cancel at any time for any reason without being charged or penalized. There truly is such a hot selection this month. It's difficult to choose, but I did end up picking two, and I'd like to talk about them. Starting with What Lies in the Woods by Kate Alice Marshall. This is an adult mystery thriller that is centered on female friendship, but it's about a group of 11-year-olds who survive a horrific attack and put a killer in jail. However, they lied to put this person in jail. So where's the killer now? Why did they lie? I have so many questions and I need them to be answered right now. And the next book I am the most excited about, and it is Independence by Chitra Banaji Divakaruni. The cover of it says three sisters, their deep bond, and the struggle for India's freedom. It sounds like Tomb of Sam by Katanjali Shree, a book that sits on my favorite shelf, meets a Khaled Hosseini book, who's one of my favorite authors of all time. Also, for all of you Leigh Bardugo stands out there, the sequel to Ninth House, otherwise known as Hellbent, is in the Book of the Month selections this month. So if you would like to get your first book from Book of the Month for $9.99, you can click the link in the description box below and use the code AllisonPages. Happy reading! Thank you so much for sponsoring today's video, Book of the Month. I love working with y'all. I love this service. I love the books. I read one this month. We'll talk about it because obviously we're here to discuss the reading month that just came to a close. I read 6 books in December, which is still substantial, but definitely on the shorter side for me personally. I would like to blame good old classic seasonal depression, the busyness that ensues during the holiday season, and my personal favorite, the new Pokemon game coming out. Do you want to see my party? Let me show you my party. So my top priority in every Pokemon game is to get all the evolutions, and I'm only missing Glaceon. In my active squad, I have an Espeon named Lychee, I have a Leafeon named Rosemary, an Arcanine named Soup. Just look at Soup go. Fantastic. We also have a Gyarados named Noodle. We evolved him ourselves from a little Magikarp. A Sliggoo named Napto. When were y'all gonna tell me that there was a snail Pokemon in the Pokemon universe? Fake friends. All of you. And of course, the infamous Wigglytuff named Sheehan Hall. But that is so much far from the point. Back to the books. I read 2 nonfictions, 1 festive romance, 1 poetry collection, and a historical fiction. Is that math? And 1 magical realism. The first book I read in December was Unmasking Autism by Dr. Devin Price. Let me find one of the pages that punched me in the gut. Now I know I'm autistic, but I kind of found out about it too late, she says. If I tell people, they don't want to believe me. I have my life together too much for them to realize how hard it all is. Nobody wants to hear now about how hard it's always been. Always still is, frankly. At this point, I've heard hundreds of autistic people tell versions of Crystal's story. Some of the details change, but the narrative arc is always the same. A child exhibits early signs of difficulty, but their families and teachers balk when disability is raised. Parents or grandparents who themselves have autism spectrum trait dismiss the child's complaints, claiming that everybody suffers from the social stress, sensory sensitivities, stomach issues, or cognitive fuzziness they themselves experience. Everyone in the child's life views disability not as an explanation of how a person functions and what help they need in order to function, but a sign of damage. So they push the label away and tell their child to stop making such a fuss, believing they are helping their child rise above a limitation and be tough. They encourage the child not to be visibly odd or to ever ask for assistance. Now, before we talk about this book, I feel like it's very important to cover what the term masking is. Masking is a term that is used for the many gymnastics that we as autistic people may perform in order to blend in better with the world around us. So this could be anything from subconsciously or consciously mimicking behaviors of the people we share a room with, putting excessive focus on our eye contact. Are we doing it too much? Are we doing it too little? Are we breathing too loud? Are we breathing too quiet? Does anyone care if I breathe quietly? Is anyone even thinking about my breathing? I'm sure thinking about my breathing. It's as exhausting as it sounds. But what makes masking extra exhausting is that we tend to mute, suppress, or just not partake in our self-soothing behaviors. So for me personally, I love to twirl my hair. I like to flap my hands when I'm excited. I love to rub my hands together. I love me a good hand rub. But we might not be doing those things, which we need now more than ever, because holy smokes, is it stressful to socialize. I hope you get the idea. I hope I explained that fine enough. Because the point is, you are looking at my favorite nonfiction about autism. Despite the fact that I've read quite a few at this point, from memoirs to more textbook style-y ones to even a graphic novel, this one still had me learning more about myself. As the title suggests, this one specifically covers what Price deems as masked autism, which refers to all of us who may fly more under the radar, so to say, which really just means that we do most of our suffering silently and internally. If one masks, this does not mean that autism affects their life less. Just because you can't see a disability doesn't mean that it's not there. It just means that it affects the person differently. In fact, masking can lead to a sea of new consequences and greatly negatively impact our quality of life. This book covers it all. Now, what I think is so special about this book is that most of what the world knows about autism, doctors included, don't even get me started on that, is how autism manifests in cis boys and men. So I've been seeking out books over the years that center women's experiences. The thing is, I don't think calling it female autism is the most accurate term either. So I loved Price's ungendered terminology. Within it, we are recognizing trans experiences and also how cultural differences can affect how a person is perceived or diagnosed. And it was just done so well as well, in my opinion. Perfect combination of straight facts and individual experiences compact with pertinent information. I thought that this was validating and comforting, but most importantly, useful and informative. There are activities and questionnaires and things of the like within it, kind of like a workbook. Couldn't recommend it enough. A lot of the time, I still hate myself for being so irritable and needy and can't fathom how anybody could love me as I am. I promise someday I will be able to recognize your unconditional acceptance and love as a thing that I and you and all people deserve. Up next, I read The Surrender Theory Poems by Caitlin Conlon. Now, if you've been around for a couple of months, you know that I've been trying to unlock my poetry girl era. And so my bookish friend Kirsty put me onto this one. She sent me a poem and I was sold immediately. Let's find it. It's called You Cooked For Me. You cooked for me once again in the time that we were together. Pasta, vegetarian. I leaned against your doorway, not yet comfortable in any place that belonged to you, and said how touched I was that you'd listened to my nervous babble on our first date. No meat, but dairy is fine. It felt like the kindest thing anyone had ever done for me, mixing handmade pesto in a white bowl, clearing away a stack of unopened mail from a stool so I could sit and watch the steam rise. In retrospect, I can see that you gave me very little, and I tried to build an entire future with it. You must understand, I had never been remembered like that before. With purpose, without begging for it. I took what I was offered and ran. So after being sent that, I bought it immediately. I read the entire collection since, and I loved it. Just look at all of these dog ears. Look at all of them. So obviously, I really connected to several of these poems. So many had me pausing and reflecting. I mean, come on. My heart is less creature and more trying her best. Less sacrifice, more empathy. I say don't bleed for anything that doesn't stay with you until morning. I say I have no interest in dying for the things I love anymore. It's better just to live for them. What this book taught me is that poetry requires its very special section of my brain. You know, fiction uses a part, nonfiction uses a part, but poetry demands a very other corner of your cranium. And I could just feel this one unlocking that part of my brain, and it just felt so good. The Surrender Theory centers grief surrounding the loss of a loved one, as well as the grief that comes along having your heart broken. I've had my heart pulverized plenty of times, and I felt like this one covered what that feels like in such a accurate but somehow comforting way. There's another page with a poem on it that talks about the remorse that blossoms when you look back on all of this time you spent on people that weren't worth it, instead of saying thank you to the people who laid out the foundation for your life. And it really left me thinking, oh my god, I spent so much time worrying about some stupid boy than thanking my mom for always having clean towels in the bathroom or making all the holidays so special. And so I sent the poem to her and said thank you and almost cried. Now, of course, since I have very minimal poetry experience, I was second guessing myself. I was thinking, is this actually good, or would I just not know good poetry if it slapped me in the face? But of course, art is subjective, and so maybe you'll hate it, but I loved it. It inspired me to read more poetry, and spoiler alert, I've already picked up Mary Oliver's Devotions as per all y'all's recommendations, and you guys couldn't have been more correct. This slaps. I am here to announce that I'm officially in my poetry girl era. It's been unlocked. She's here. Next, I read Kiss Her Once for Me by Allison Cochran. This is a festive sapphic romance, and y'all, I had so much fun here. You know those cheesy Hallmark movies that are so bad they're good? Well, what if they were so good they were good? Here she is. The short synopsis is, last Christmas, I gave someone my heart, and the very next day, she gave it away. But the longer synopsis is that we meet our protagonist, Ellie, and she's about to experience her second Christmas since moving to Portland. Last Christmas, her mother bailed on her and the plans that they made, so she was fully prepared to spend Christmas Eve crying in the graphic novel section of a bookstore. However, she meets a very wonderful and charming and tough-looking lady while she's sobbing, and they share this magical evening together that turns sour, but we don't know what happened yet. This next part is not a spoiler, it's the synopsis, but she enters a fake dating scenario where she's going to fake marry somebody, and in order to fulfill this deal, she has to spend Christmas with this fake fiance's family. It sounds simple enough, except when she meets the family, the sister of her fake fiance is the girl from the snow day from last Christmas. Not only is this a fun, flirty, and festive read, but it also had a nice sprinkle of class commentary in there as well, in my opinion. Just to me, this book was the perfect balance of silly and serious. I had so much fun reading it. It felt very Christmassy, and I've also been seeing this in a lot of booktubers' top books of the year, and I can totally see why. Next, Homegoing by Yagyasi. The blurb of this one says, Effie and Essie, two sisters with two very different destinies. One sold into slavery, one a slave trader's wife. Now, I read this one with my Sunday book club with some friends back home, and I just gotta say, holy f***, does this make a great book club book. First of all, because in the United States, at least between our two schools, we covered that slavery existed in the US, but we didn't really follow the steps on how that came to be, and this book shows that. But also, our schools didn't show us how other countries partook in the same human rights violations. And so we also don't learn about the many strings that colonizers had to pull in order to make all of this suffering happen. So this is just crucial reading, especially seeing the holes that exist within our public education system. It also just packs such a punch in quite a shorter read. The many characters and generations that we span, you would think that this would be this big, but it's this big. My friend described this as a book that respects your time, which I think is just so perfectly put. So within this one, you're bouncing between two timelines essentially, or rather the two paths that form once the sisters begin their lives very separately. And so each chapter you bounce up one generation with a different character, which sounds overwhelming, but I promise you it is not. It is just done so well. You are really just led through time in this beautiful, powerful, poetic, traumatic, yet hopeful weaving of many lives. It just felt like every choice that Gyasi made was intentional and was the perfect storytelling move. Every little thing, every little detail, it's all connected. I loved the visual motif of fire and how that ties into the theme of the resilience required for women to survive in journeys such as this. This story has you caring immediately. I cannot emphasize enough how well it is written. I know that everyone was reading this one way back in the early days of BookTube, and it got rave reviews. So I'm here to say that not only does it deserve such high praises, but also to encourage you, if you are like me and you missed out on that bandwagon, it is never too late to hop on. This was my favorite book from December personally, and also the runner-up for best historical fiction overall from last year. If you read any book from this stack, make it be this one. Next, What You Can See From Here by Mariana Leckie. So the last book I read for my personal book club, but this one we read for the Pocket Pages book club, which is the book club for this channel. We read something new within the first 3 weeks of every month and discuss in a temporary Discord server in the last week of every month. So there's no way to miss out. Time zones can't stop us. Join us if you'd like. Now the blurb says that this book is about a woman who lives in a village, and whenever she dreams of an okapi, or the animal that is on the cover, that someone in the village dies. And I was so entirely certain that this would be a new favorite, so much so that I held off filming last week's video, the favorite books of 2022, because I thought that this would make the cut, and it just didn't. This book very much fell in the middle for me. I was so disappointed. Not because it was the worst book ever and I hated it, but the hopes were just so high and it fell so below them. Personally for me, what's most important is to make it clear that this book really isn't centered on the whole okapi dream prophecy situation. It's more so a slow literary fiction about a little girl growing up, her grandma, and her grandma's lover, which is fine and good and dandy, but I personally just felt a little bit deceived by what this book claimed it was about. The writing also somehow wasn't very much for me, despite having some serious punches, which we'll talk about. There was something about it that I can't quite put my finger on, whether it was the pacing, maybe it was the translation, but it just sort of dragged for me, especially after part 1, so well over half of the book, and I just never cared about the characters as much as I wanted to. I always felt like there was a wall or a really deep distance between us. But like I said, don't get me wrong, there are some seriously impeccable lines. For example, I decided I would marry Martin one day because I believed that someone who would spare you from having to watch the world take its course had to be the right person. Or love and death, I said. You can't practice for either one and you can't escape them. Both will befall you. So looking back and reflecting on those lines during our discussion depression had me falling in love with those bookish beats all over again. But somehow, those moments just didn't seem to flow with the rest of the story. Aside from one moment that of course existed in the first part of this book, this one was just forgettable to me. The moment I'm speaking of is when the protagonist is going through a hard time and she's talking to her grandmother. A section I can read to you without spoiling is, "I don't want to grow up," I said. "For a while, the only sound was the ticking of the alarm clock." "I know," Selma finally said, "but we'd be very happy if you decided to grow up anyway." That's so sweet. And the pages before that encapsulate this entire moment was so heartwarming and touching and out of this world and almost had me crying. Like, that part, I wanted to just take it and run. I really did. But it almost didn't even fit with the rest of the story for me. However, do not let my experience with this book sway you from picking it up, because it really did seem like most everyone in the Discord chat loved this one, and at least half of those people deem this a new favorite. And also, don't get me wrong, I didn't hate it, but I just had trouble following it and connecting with it, is all. And lastly, I read How Not to Die by Dr. Michael Greger. Now, if you want to talk about complex and complicated feelings towards a book, let's talk about this one. Where do I even begin? Let's start with why I picked it up. I bought this book way back in 2018, I think. I was 2 years into my eating plant-based journey, so to say, and I bought it specifically for the chapter about depression. I read that chapter about what foods to eat to combat depression, and then I put it back on my TBR shelf and have it touched in since. However, recently I had a doctor's appointment that was beyond disappointing. Too long didn't read edition. I've been waiting to see the specialist for years. I finally get to sit down with them. I see them for barely any time at all. I get to share my distressing and life-altering and painful symptoms, one of them being 16 migraines in a month, and they look at me and say, "Well, you don't look sick." So, needless to say, I am this close to my breaking point. You win some, you lose most. So I picked this book up again and read it within like 4 or 5 days because I just wanted control over my health and my body and my suffering. Did I get the information that I came here for? Yes, technically. I know which foods are good against inflammation and in what combinations. I know which foods are good for melatonin production to help you sleep, which is good for your health overall. I learned that taking a shot of beet juice 30 minutes before exercising will help the oxygen in your blood and allow you to perform better. I learned stuff, but there is a lot that I didn't like about this book as well. The first one being, it is so repetitive. For good reason? Sure, maybe, yes. But does that change the reading experience just because it's reasonable? No. I totally understand that fruits and veggies are gonna help you within most things that can harm your life, except for maybe a bus. But there are only so many creative ways that you can say that, let alone in 500 pages. Secondly, does this book contain nuance? Absolutely not. Which is to be expected, seeing as a doctor wrote it and it's just about nutrition, but it simply does not even begin to cover the many socioeconomic hurdles that may prevent somebody from, I don't know, making date syrup themselves by hand to replace sugar in their diet. And I understand that dates are cheaper than doctors, especially in the United States, but then that just opens a whole other can of worms. Why is healthcare so expensive? Why aren't humans being granted enough free time to relax and exercise and prepare food for themselves? That's a whole other conversation. I get it. This isn't supposed to be a sociological book or a political book. It's a biology and nutrition book. Okay, fine. But the thing is that in not mentioning these things, it just seemed that Dr. Michael is very disconnected from reality and just people in general. For example, there's a section in this book where he's talking about a heart condition and how most doctors will recommend that their patients eat less meat and more fruits and veggies. And Dr. Michael goes on this whole tangent about why doesn't the doctor just tell him to eat no cheese and no dairy and no meat, because that's what's best for him. And I'm just sitting here like, do I really need to explain this to you? If a doctor told a 6-year-old patient who's been eating omnivorous for their entire life that they need to cut out most of the foods that they've been eating, they wouldn't even try to make any changes. That just isn't realistic for most people. It just isn't. If you hand something to a patient that isn't fathomable to them, they're not even gonna try and dip their toes into it. And sometimes, if not most of the time, small baby steps, some changes, it's better than nothing. And the fact that you can't recognize that is a little bit concerning to me. Is the author correct that the standard American diet is considered sad not just because of the letters that it is abbreviated down to? Yes, of course, he's correct. I'm not saying he's wrong. I just wish he stuck to the food facts and left the judgment out of it. The way this was written definitely made it feel like some changes were pointless. It was a very all or nothing book. On the surface, it is hopeful. It's encouraging. This idea that we have the power and control, despite the socioeconomic complications that he may not mention that still live with us every single day, to take the wheel on our health and our bodies. That's wonderful. But the thing is that I'm a firm believer that any food is better than no food at all. I definitely wouldn't recommend this book if you're triggered by food discussion, because another flaw in this, I think, is categorizing food into good and bad categories. That is just such a slippery slope, which to me is just another indicator of this author being extremely disconnected from regular people and our relationship with food, and how quickly that can get dangerous. So yes, I did learn a lot from this. It was a great resource, but there is still just so much unknown about nutrition in our bodies. So if you do read this, I would suggest that you listen to a great podcast called Maintenance Phase as a wonderful supplemental resource to all of this, because it's very easy to fall into this thinking that he has all the answers, but it's important to remember that nobody has all the answers. And at the end of the day, I suppose my biggest gripe with it was the inaccessibility and the fat phobia gently sprinkled throughout. Like, yes, sure, let's avoid diabetes, but under no circumstances am I ever gonna accept the just go vegan, it'll make you skinny narrative. Shut up. Shut the fuck up. What in the freely the banana girl take is this, doc? Not only is that damaging, not only is that gross, but it's flat out not true. And also, as far as inaccessibility is concerned, you can't follow everything because it'll harm another thing. For example, in one section of the book he says, hey, 4 cups of coffee a day lowers liver inflammation. Isn't that wonderful? Let's just disregard the fact that if I drink 4 cups of coffee in a day, my heart would explode. But then again, we revisit the whole coffee concept in the mental health chapter. And within it, he states that 2 cups of coffee a day increases the risk of suicidal ideation. So the mental gymnastics that one has to perform in order to balance all of this information feels impossible. Am I so jazzed to know that there's more potassium in Reese's Pieces than there are in bananas? Absolutely. That's my new fun party fact. I'm gonna be pulling it out every chance I get. But do I think you need to read this? No. What makes this book powerful is the straight nutritional information. And if you want that breakdown, then I would recommend the cookbook, which yes, I bought because, like I said, he has some great knowledge about food. He isn't incorrect. He knows what he's talking about. I just didn't appreciate how he executed this one. So the cookbook is great. It has all the good parts of this book without the confusion, contradictions, and fat phobia. So that's my take on that. And that's that. Those are the 6 books I read last month. I had some big feelings about some, obviously. I'm tired now. I'm gonna edit this video and play some Pokemon. But first, a super huge thank you to Book of the Month for sponsoring today's video. Friendly reminder, click the link in the description box below and get your first book from Book of the Month for $9.99 using the code AllisonPages if you so choose. And another big thank you to everyone on patreon.com who make it possible for reading books and talking about them on the internet.com to be my job. I don't make any money from AdSense. This channel is sponsored by y'all as well. So that is that. I hope you're having a happy new year. I promise a vlog is coming next week. Don't worry, keep your pants on. And as always, thank you for clicking, thank you for caring, and thank you for being nice. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!